Tonight, text thread revealed.
Just confirmed with CENTCOM we are a go for mission launch.
Classified.
The White House responds after the reporter invited to a private chat about a military operation releases the texts to the public.
Plus, taking the streets. Palestinians protest Hamas, demanding peace and telling the terror group to get out.
And fact or fiction.
Do you believe a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could literally trigger World War III?
I do.
New York Times best-selling author Joel Rosenberg's latest thriller. How close does it mirror our current reality?
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. New questions tonight as the Signal chat leak grows. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening. In Washington, I'm John Jessup. Well, calls for someone to be fired are growing louder tonight now that the Signal group text of a military attack plan goes public. The reporter mistakenly invited into the thread, releasing screenshots today, fueling a national security firestorm.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt discussed the matter with reporters at the White House press briefing today. CBN's Kelly Wright was there. He joins us now with more details. Kelly, how did Caroline address the issue?
Well, good evening to you both. It all began by the Signal leak matter growing to the top of mind among most reporters attending today's briefing. In her opening remarks, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated the following about the issue.
We have said all along that no classified material was sent on this messaging thread. There were no locations, no sources or methods revealed, and there were certainly no war plans discussed. The Atlantic has even admitted this themselves. Their release of these internal messages validates the truth, which we have been saying all along.
So here's the sticking point in this issue. The Atlantic released the following text from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Take a look at it. You can see at 12:15, he talks about F-18s launching, the first strike package. And then at 13:45, he says trigger base, F-18 first strike window starts. And then target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch MQ-9s, and then more F-18s launch. And then the second strike package, he texts, strikes drones on target, and this is when the first bombs will definitely drop, pending earlier trigger-based targets. And then at 15:36, F-18 second strike starts. Also, first sea-based Tomahawks launch. So the bottom line is that text was shared on the app Signal instead of a government-secured site, and that's what Democrats have taken issue with.
So, Kelly, while you were at the White House press briefing and that was taking place, there were some members of the president's intelligence team that faced the House Intelligence Committee on Capitol Hill a day after the Senate Intelligence Committee. What can you tell us about the top-line events that happened there?
Well, another intense day. During that hearing on Capitol Hill, congressional members of the committee questioned the Trump administration's intel chiefs. That included National Director of Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and FBI Director Kash Patel about the Signal leak. Democrats calling for the resignation of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Republican members pushing back, pointing out how Hegseth's texts about the operation of the attack, they say, did not reveal any classified information, and reminded the entire committee that the mission, in fact, was successful. But Democrats still argue that it should have never happened.
Yeah, Kelly, this issue is now also becoming a legal matter. What can you tell us about a lawsuit that's been filed against the Trump administration?
Well, here's what's happening. The nonpartisan nonprofit watchdog group American Oversight is suing the Trump administration for using Signal to plan military operations. According to the lawsuit, it targets several of the president's cabinet members, including Defense Secretary Hegseth, for violating the Federal Records Act and Administrative Procedure Act. The organization says its lawsuit seeks to prevent further unlawful destruction of federal records and recover any records created through the unauthorized use of Signal. Ironically, the case is assigned to Judge Boasberg, who is overseeing the Trump deportation case of Trende Aragua, the gang members who were sent to El Salvador.
All right, White House correspondent Kelly Wright. Thank you, Kelly. And turning now to the Middle East, rare scenes in Gaza today as Palestinians took to the streets in a bold and dangerous move, protesting against Hamas.
Crowds in Gaza City shouted for the terror group to, quote, get out. It's a stunning display of public defiance in a region where dissent could prove deadly. Similar protests erupted yesterday with signs reading, "Stop the war," and "The blood of our children is not cheap." This comes days after Israel launched new strikes, ending a ceasefire with Hamas and tightening its blockade on food, fuel, and medical supplies. Today, Israel's defense minister urging Gazans to continue the protests.
You too should demand the removal of Hamas from Gaza and the immediate release of all Israeli hostages. That is the only way to stop this war.
Meanwhile, Israel is keeping up its campaign against Hamas, warning that the military could begin seizing territory if Hamas refuses to release the 59 hostages still in captivity. Hamas then threatened to return the hostages in, quote, coffins if Israel strikes continues.
Joining us now is Jonathan Saye. He is a research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, welcome. So we really never see public protests against Hamas in Gaza. How significant are these demonstrations, and what do they tell us about the mood on the ground?
The recent protests highlight the key grievance of Gazans, which is Hamas rule, effectively. This further demonstrates that Hamas as a terrorist group does not safeguard Palestinian interests and has effectively taken 2 million people hostage. Israelis and Americans have been unified on this policy stance that Hamas should not maintain control of the Gaza Strip, and now Gazan residents are also calling for the removal of Hamas. They have a tough road ahead of them.
Jonathan, with Hamas's tight control in Gaza, how dangerous is it for people to speak out like this? And then could this possibly spark a broader movement or even a broader backlash?
It is very likely. Ultimately, what we need to keep in mind about these terrorist groups, their authoritarian nature and their Islamist nature prevents any sort of freedom of speech, expression, or any sort of discontent against the ruling system, which is not unique to Hamas. It goes back to all Iranian proxies, and the Islamic Republic in Iran itself all are very, very strict when it comes to any form of dissatisfaction compared to the ruling class. So because of that, this is very unprecedented. And in a place like Gaza, where Hamas has ultimate control of the movement and of civic engagement of its residents, it is unprecedented. So we yet to see whether these can manifest into a broader movement across the Strip.
Yeah, we'll see. Jonathan, I want to ask you about the United States beefing up its Navy presence in the Middle East, given the tensions with Iran and the Houthi rebels in Yemen. How do you interpret this move, and is this purely deterrence or is it preparation for something more?
It is perhaps both. So Tehran continues to escalate both its rhetoric and actions against the United States. They supply weapons to Hamas and the Houthis in the Red Sea, and they've held numerous drills recently threatening to escalate against the United States in the Persian Gulf. I mean, ultimately, the main threat posed by Iran is their nuclear program, and now they've reportedly increased weaponization efforts. They rejected President Trump's plan of or offer of negotiations because they know they cannot obtain concessions anymore. So it seems like from the Iranian perspective, which backs Houthis and backs Hamas, the supreme leader in Tehran prefers a military confrontation as opposed to a diplomatic solution.
All right, Jonathan Saye with Foundation for Defense of Democracies, thank you so much for your time and your expertise tonight.
Thanks, Jonathan. And before we go to break, a major ruling from the Supreme Court. The justices upholding a Biden-era rule that cracks down on so-called ghost guns, weapons that can be built at home and are hard to trace.
The court ruled that kits sold online must follow the same rules as regular guns. This includes serial numbers, background checks, and age verification. The decision comes as law enforcement agencies report a sharp rise in ghost guns used in crimes, including mass shootings. Justices Thomas and Alito dissented, saying the rule goes too far.
Coming up, Planned Parenthood could lose millions in federal funds. How the Trump administration is taking aim at the abortion giant after this.
Welcome back. The Trump administration may soon freeze tens of millions of dollars in federal funding for groups providing abortions and other family planning services, including Planned Parenthood. That's according to a new report from the Wall Street Journal. As soon as this week, the Health and Human Services Department could announce a hold on more than $27 million in funds. A spokesperson told the Journal the department is reviewing grant recipients to make sure they comply with the president's executive orders and federal law. This year, the government was set to distribute $120 million in grants to organizations dealing with family planning.
Kelsey Pritchard joins us now. She is the Director of State Public Affairs for SBA Pro-Life America. Kelsey, great to have you with us. So what's your reaction to this possible freeze on federal funding to groups like Planned Parenthood?
This is good news. It's a good first step for defunding Planned Parenthood and taking actions to stop subsidizing abortion in our country. And we also saw in President Trump's first week in office, he initiated the Global Protect Life rule again, so that our taxpayer dollars aren't going to international entities that also provide abortion. So this is promising. And in the pro-life movement, we are focused on defunding Planned Parenthood this year. And this is a good step. And we're also focused on reaching our members of Congress to urge them to do this through reconciliation, so that the lion's share of the money that goes to the abortion industry through Medicaid, we're talking about $500 million annually, would no longer go to abortion businesses.
Kelsey, you just mentioned a legislative approach, but this likely will be challenged in the court. So how confident are you that this funding review process will hold up legally?
Yeah, I mean, we understand that the Trump administration's move here is related to DEI. We understand that this is not a final thing, that this is just an initial a possibility of $20 million that could be stripped from Planned Parenthood. I think the bottom line is that abortion is not family planning, and it ends the life of unborn children. And when we look at what Planned Parenthood does every year in taking the lives of 400,000 unborn children in this country, that is the equivalent to the population of New Orleans. That is a huge number of people whose lives they are ending. And also, we know that they don't provide good care for women. We know that women are being harmed. We know that a woman, an 18-year-old girl in Colorado, lost her life after Planned Parenthood botched an abortion there. So, you know, this is something that the American people are supportive of. They do not want their taxpayer dollars propping up abortion businesses.
You know, Kelsey, opponents, they'll argue that pulling this funding could limit access to critical health services, not abortion, things like breast cancer screenings and things like that, especially for low-income women. What do you say to that?
Yeah, we would say that there are a number of federally qualified health centers all across this country, and they vastly outnumber Planned Parenthoods. Planned Parenthood, they are really the business of abortion. 97% of the time when a pregnant woman walks into their facilities, she gets an abortion. She's not, getting miscarriage care often. They're not providing adoption referrals and services. They're not doing any of those other things. They are there to perform abortions. They are also decreasing in how much they are doing with contraception and anything else. Their business is abortion. Their business is ending lives, and their business destroys women's lives as well.
Just a few seconds left, Kelsey. This freeze could impact a large portion of the $120 million in federal family planning grants set aside for this year. What would SBA Pro-Life America like to see happen next in the few seconds we have left?
Yeah, I think we're very focused on the congressional approach here and completely defunding Planned Parenthood. And, this is a great first step. This is great news from the Trump administration, but Congress has the ability to do more through reconciliation and to get at the $500 million that Planned Parenthood gets through Medicaid every single year.
All right, Kelsey Pritchard with SBA Pro-Life America. Kelsey, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Kelsey. Up next, the latest thriller from best-selling author Joel Rosenberg. See why the Beijing betrayal may not just be a novel, but tomorrow's news too.
Welcome back. A new U.S. intelligence report is raising serious concerns about China, calling it the biggest military and cyber threat facing the United States. The report says China has the power to strike the U.S. with traditional weapons. disrupt critical infrastructure through cyber attacks, and even target American systems in space. It also says Beijing is pushing to lead the world in artificial intelligence by 2030. And when it comes to Taiwan, the report says China is making steady, though uneven, progress on military moves that could be used to try and take the island.
And that warning from U.S. intelligence isn't just raising concerns right here in Washington, D.C. It's also the heart of a new political thriller that feels straight out of real life.
The author Joel Rosenberg takes on the threat from China in his new novel, The Beijing Betrayal. CBN's Wendy Griffith recently spoke with Rosenberg about the danger posed by China and why he thinks World War III is a possible reality.
The Beijing Betrayal is the last in a series of Joel Rosenberg's fictional spy thrillers featuring Marcus Riker that began in 2018. In this latest page-turner, China is the enemy, with Taiwan fighting for its survival, and the U.S. facing another plague.
And is Communist China simultaneously going to unleash a new biological toxin into the United States that could kill millions and millions of Americans and hamper or complicate or thwart the United States' ability to defend Taiwan and our alliance in the Pacific? That's fiction at the moment, but I think these are real, live, real-world threats that China poses. And look, President Trump is really tough on China. He's good on China, but I don't think he's doing enough to strengthen our alliance with Taiwan or give them enough weapons to make sure Beijing wouldn't try to invade.
Do you believe a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could literally trigger World War III?
I do. And the reason is because, like, most Americans don't really think about Taiwan. It's a small island in the South China Sea. It's not a country that most people can find on a map. However, Taiwan produces 97% of the most high-tech microchips that all of our computers and phones and AI equipment and so forth uses, as well as all kinds of other high-tech products. But if Communist China actually attacked it, and if they actually grabbed it like they want to do in the Beijing Betrayal, it's not just the loss of one country. Every ally the United States has in the Pacific would feel suddenly like the United States doesn't know how to defend them. South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Australia, the Philippines, and so forth.
Well, in your novel, you have China secretly working with a radical Islamist terrorist group to bring about something far worse than 9/11. How likely is that scenario?
Well, it's certainly what Communist China wants, right? Like again, I go back to the Wuhan laboratory in that city called Wuhan in China, in which they were developing one of the worst viruses that modern mankind has experienced, what became COVID-19. But moreover, Wendy, global governments, but the American government shut down churches, forbade Christians from going to church on Sundays or Wednesday nights. If you had a casino in America, you could stay open, a strip club, a bar, a liquor store. No problem. Keep those open. But churches were shut down. This is part of Communist China's tyrannical biological weapon to neutralize the United States and our allies.
Let's switch gears real quick. What do you think about President Trump's plans for a new and beautiful Gaza?
It's a fascinating vision. Everybody's been criticizing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for not having a plan for a day after this war. But Netanyahu has had his hands full with getting this war won. The fact that President Trump has stepped forward, not a single Arab state has proposed an actual solution, an actual way to fix Gaza, pacify it, denazify it, de-Hamasify it, and rebuild it. Not a single Arab country has done that. As you and I speak, Trump said, I'll do it.
Do you think we're living in the end times, Joel?
There's no question about it. The fact that Israel exists right now and has for almost 8 decades, it's itself the fulfillment or the beginnings of the fulfillment of ancient end times Bible prophecy. This is Ezekiel 36. This is Ezekiel 37, as well as Isaiah, Jeremiah, the minor prophets. All said that Israel would be rebuilt and would be a sovereign nation state in the end of days before the Messiah, Jesus, comes back. Jews are returning to Israel. That's what my family and I did, and we've been citizens in Israel for more than 10 years. 2 of my sons have served in the Israeli military, and we are all in as Israeli citizens and strengthening the church through the Joshua Fund in Israel and the Palestinian areas and in the region. So yeah, we're absolutely there. Now, what happens next? That's really interesting. And I'll just say, in Zephaniah chapter 2, the prophet actually tells us that before the tribulation, all people in Gaza are going to be removed. Gaza will be abandoned, the text says, and then God will give the land back to the people of Judah. Well, that's the nation we call today Israel.
Joel, what do you hope people will take away from your new book, The Beijing Betrayal?
Well, first, I just want them to have a rip-roaring, exciting, entertaining ride, right? And so where they're up all night, and these chapters, they're short, they're intense, cliffhanger endings. They're like Pringles. You can't eat just one. But I also want to educate. I want to warn. Communist China is a major threat, not only to the United States and our allies in the Pacific, but China's building a very dangerous strategic alliance with the Iranian regime.
And that makes China's communist regime a serious threat to Israel and the Jewish people. Rosenberg hopes the Trump administration, Congress, and Israel will make it a priority to counter the range of threats from Beijing before it's too late. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Thank you, Wendy. And still ahead, 1 year later, remembering the deadly collapse of this bridge and its 6 victims. You're watching CBN's Faith Nation.
Well, before we go, it's hard to believe it's been 1 year since the deadly Key Bridge collapsed in Maryland.
Yeah, we all remember that day. Yesterday, families of the construction workers who died, they marked the anniversary. Today is actually the anniversary, though. They were throwing wreaths in the water. You'll remember a massive cargo ship lost power and crashed into one of the bridge's support columns. The crash destroying the Baltimore landmark and killing 6 men who were filling potholes on an overnight shift. Here is Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
I'm thankful that we promised those 6 families that we would be able to bring their family members back. And it took 5 weeks, but we were able to recover all the bodies and return them to their family members so they could have a proper closure.
And the governor also said he was thankful for the first responders and the unified command, and that clearing the channel was really supposed to take about 11 months. They got it done in 11 weeks. So a great job to them, and our hearts go out still to the families.
That's right. Well, that does it for Faith Nation.
Have a great night.